a stranger in the ice. The wind howled through the vast expanse of frozen wilderness, a relentless reminder of the planet's harshness. Ethan Grayson, a rugged survivalist and former engineer, had carved out a life for himself amidst the ice. His modest shelter, a reinforced dome made of packed snow and salvaged materials, stood resilient against the icy gusts. Inside, the faint hum of a heater provided the only semblance of warmth and comfort. As Ethan sat sipping his lukewarm coffee, the faintest sound caught his attention. It wasn't the groan of shifting ice or the whistle of the wind. No, this was different, a faint, almost melodic cry that tugged at his instincts. Grabbing his thermal jacket and flashlight, he stepped outside into the frigid darkness. The sound grew louder as he trudged through knee-deep snow, his breath crystallizing in the freezing air. Suddenly, he spotted a figure collapsed in the snow. It was humanoid, but not human. A translucent layer of frost clung to its shimmering blue skin, and its glowing green eyes flickered weakly. Ethan's instincts warred with his logic. This wasn't Earth. It hadn't been for decades since humanity fled their dying planet. He knew other species existed, some hostile, others neutral, but this one was different. Fragile. Vulnerable. Lifting the creature gently, he muttered, "Hang in there," as he hurried back to his shelter. Inside, he wrapped the being in his warmest blanket and placed it near the heater. Slowly, its glow returned, and its eyes opened, locking onto his with a mix of gratitude and fear. "Who are you?" Ethan asked softly. "I am Arya," the being whispered, her voice like a song carried on the wind. "Thank you, for saving me." Ethan nodded, his curiosity tempered by the urgency of her condition. "You're safe now. Rest. We'll talk later." As Arya drifted into a fitful sleep, Ethan couldn't help but wonder what had brought her to this desolate ice world? And what dangers might follow? The silent crash. The faint hum of the heater provided a comforting backdrop as Ethan watched Arya sleep, her form still shivering under the thick blankets. Despite her fragile appearance, there was something otherworldly about her presence. Her skin glowed faintly, shifting between shades of blue and silver, and intricate patterns etched across her face and arms seemed to pulse softly with each breath. Morning arrived, though it brought no sunlight, only the endless gray skies that blanketed the icy planet. Ethan sat at the edge of his makeshift bed, his thoughts racing. Questions swirled in his mind. Where had Arya come from? Why was she here? Most importantly, was she alone? Arya stirred, her glowing green eyes blinking open. For a moment, there was fear in her gaze, but it softened when she saw Ethan sitting nearby. "You're awake," he said, handing her a small cup of warm broth. "Drink this. It'll help." She hesitated, then took the cup with trembling hands. "Thank you, Ethan." Her voice, melodic and lilting, carried an unearthly quality that made him pause. "How do you know my name?" he asked cautiously. I don't know," she admitted, her brow furrowing. "Your thoughts, they're loud. Clearer than most I've encountered. It's strange." Ethan leaned back, his instincts alert but his curiosity piqued. "All right, Arya. Start from the beginning. What happened to you?" She looked down at her hands, the glow in her skin dimming slightly. "My people, we are travelers, explorers. Our mission is to seek out uninhabited worlds, ones we can study and learn from without interference. But something went wrong. My ship, it lost power during a storm. I crashed here, alone." Ethan frowned. "And your crew?" She shook her head, her expression heavy with sorrow. "Gone. My ship was not meant to land, it was only meant to observe. When it fell, it shattered. I couldn't save them." A long silence hung between them, broken only by the crackle of the heater. Ethan felt a pang of sympathy. He knew all too well the weight of loss. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "But why here? This place, it's nothing but ice and death." Arya looked at him, her eyes shimmering with faint light. "Not nothing. Your people left traces. Signals, fragments of data. This world, it wasn't always like this, was it?" Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't thought about Earth's past in years. The planet's climate had collapsed long before his time, turning it into an inhospitable wasteland. Yet the idea that other species could detect humanity's lingering footprint fascinated and unsettled him. "You came here because of us," he said slowly. "Yes," Arya confirmed. "We believed your kind might still exist here. But all I found was silence." Ethan exhaled, his breath misting in the cold air. "You're not wrong. There's no one left here. Just me and the ice." Arya's gaze softened. "Then perhaps it was not all for nothing. Finding you means there is still hope." Her words struck a chord in Ethan. He had spent so long in isolation, surviving day to day, that he had forgotten what hope even felt like. "Hope," he muttered. "That's a rare thing in these parts." Arya leaned forward slightly, her voice urgent. "Ethan, my ship, it still has a beacon. If I can repair it, I can send a signal to my people. They'll come for me, and maybe they can help you, too." He considered her words, the pragmatic part of his mind wary. "You think they'll care about me? A relic from a species that's all but extinct?" Arya smiled faintly. "My people value life in all its forms. They will care." Ethan glanced at the pile of tools in the corner of his igloo. His instinct told him to keep his distance, to not get involved with something that could spiral out of control. But another part of him, a part that hadn't surfaced in years, wanted to believe her. To believe that there was more to life than mere survival. "All right," he said finally. "We'll check out your ship. But if we're doing this, you'll need to trust me. Out there, the cold doesn't care where you're from. It'll kill you if you're not careful." "I understand," Arya said, her glow brightening slightly. "And I trust you, Ethan." The decision made, they prepared for the journey. Arya donned an extra set of thermal layers that Ethan had cobbled together, while he gathered supplies and equipment. As they stepped outside, the cold bit at their faces, and the wind howled with renewed ferocity. "Which way?" Ethan asked, squinting against the glare of the icy expanse. Arya pointed toward the horizon, where jagged ice formations rose like ancient monuments. "That way. It's not far." They set off, their footsteps crunching through the snow. The landscape stretched endlessly around them, a stark reminder of the planet's desolation. Yet, for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel entirely alone. As they walked, Arya shared fragments of her people's history. She spoke of a vibrant world bathed in golden light, where her kind lived in harmony with their environment. Ethan found himself captivated by her descriptions, even as he marveled at her resilience. Hours later, they reached the crash site. The wreckage of Arya's ship lay scattered across the ice, its once sleek design now twisted and broken. Ethan approached cautiously, his engineer's mind already assessing the damage. "This is it," Arya said, her voice tinged with both sadness and determination. "If we can salvage the beacon, I can send a signal." Ethan nodded, his hands already reaching for his tools. "Then let's get to work." As they began the painstaking process of salvaging the ship, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a mission to repair a beacon. It was a chance for both of them to find something they had lost: hope, connection, and perhaps even a future. A beacon of hope. The wreckage of Arya's ship was a haunting sight. Its once sleek hull, designed for the elegance of interstellar travel, was now a twisted labyrinth of jagged metal and shattered panels. The faint glow of residual power coursed through the fragments, flickering like a heartbeat clinging to life. Ethan stood silently for a moment, taking in the magnitude of the damage. "This is going to be a challenge," he muttered, kneeling beside a large piece of the ship's hull. Arya crouched beside him, her shimmering fingers tracing the edges of a fractured panel. "I know it looks hopeless," she said softly, "but the beacon's core should still be intact. It's designed to withstand crashes like this." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That's some impressive engineering. Your people seem to think of everything." Arya gave a faint smile, but there was a shadow of doubt in her eyes. "We prepare for survival. But even the best designs have limits." Ethan nodded and began unpacking his tools. First step is finding that core. After that, we'll see if it can be powered. As they worked, the biting cold gnawed at their exposed skin. Ethan's gloves were thick, but the sharp edges of the wreckage tore at the fabric. Arya, for all her otherworldly resilience, began to tremble as the icy winds sapped her strength. Here, Ethan said, shrugging off his outer thermal jacket and draping it over her shoulders. You need this more than I do. Arya looked at him, her glowing green eyes filled with a gratitude that needed no words. She adjusted the jacket around her, its bulk comical against her slender frame, and resumed her work with renewed determination. Unearthing the core. After hours of painstaking effort, Ethan's flashlight beam reflected off a cylindrical object buried beneath layers of debris. The core. Its surface was smooth and pristine, a stark contrast to the mangled metal surrounding it. Faint lines of light pulsed along its surface, indicating that some power remained. This is it, Arya said, her voice tinged with awe. The beacon's core. Ethan leaned closer, inspecting the device. It's in better shape than I expected. But without a power source, it's just a fancy paperweight. Arya's expression shifted to one of resolve. The core contains a microgenerator, but it's dormant. If we can access the energy reserves in the ship's remains, we might be able to recharge it. Ethan glanced at the wreckage, his mind already mapping out a plan. All right. Let's salvage what we can. Batteries, conduits, anything with a charge. The two of them worked tirelessly, scouring the wreckage for usable components. As they unearthed power cells and severed cables, Arya shared fragments of her people's knowledge. Ethan listened intently, marveling at the sophistication of her technology and the ingenuity of her species. A glimmer of progress. By the time they returned to the core, the sky had darkened, and the temperature had plummeted. Ethan set up a makeshift workstation using a flat piece of metal as a table. He connected the salvaged power cells to the core, his hands moving with practiced precision. Arya watched silently, her glowing skin casting faint light over the scene. Despite her exhaustion, there was a quiet determination in her gaze. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for her people and for the hope that they could find refuge in a universe filled with dangers. As Ethan made the final connection, a faint hum filled the air. The core flickered to life, its lights glowing steadily. Arya's eyes widened, and a smile broke across her face. You did it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan smirked, wiping the sweat from his brow. We did it. But don't celebrate just yet. The real test is whether this thing can transmit. Arya nodded and knelt beside the core, her hands hovering over its surface. Symbols and patterns illuminated under her touch, and the hum of the device grew louder. It's working, she said, her voice trembling with excitement. The signal is transmitting. Ethan felt a surge of relief, but it was tempered by a gnawing uncertainty. How long until someone responds? Arya's expression turned serious. It depends. My people might be nearby, or they could be light years away. We have to be patient. Ethan sighed and leaned back against a piece of the wreckage. Patience isn't my strong suit. Arya laughed softly, a sound that seemed to brighten the icy night. Then perhaps it's time you learned. A bond forged in ice. The days that followed were a test of endurance and willpower. Ethan and Arya worked together to maintain the core's signal, braving the harsh conditions and scavenging the surrounding area for supplies. They fell into a rhythm, their differences fading as they grew to rely on each other. Arya's knowledge of technology and Ethan's practical survival skills proved to be a perfect match. Together, they repaired makeshift shelters, crafted tools, and even rigged a small heater from parts salvaged from the ship. As they shared stories by the warm glow of their campfire, a bond began to form. Arya spoke of her home, a world of golden skies and endless forests where her people lived in harmony. Ethan, in turn, shared tales of Earth's past, of humanity's triumphs and failures. Despite their vastly different origins, they found common ground in their shared resilience and determination. A flicker of hope. On the seventh day, as the icy wind howled outside their shelter, a faint vibration ran through the ground. Arya and Ethan exchanged a glance, their hearts pounding. The beacon had worked. Outside, the night sky lit up with a brilliant streak of light as a sleek, silver ship descended from the heavens. It hovered above the ice, its design unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. A hatch opened, and figures emerged, tall, graceful beings who bore a striking resemblance to Arya. "They came," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. Ethan felt a mix of relief and sadness. This moment marked the end of their time together, but it also represented the fulfillment of their efforts. As Arya turned to him, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude, he knew he had made the right choice in helping her. "You saved me, Ethan," she said, her voice trembling. "And now, you've given my people a chance to survive. I'll never forget this." He nodded, his throat tight. "Take care of yourself, Arya. And if you ever need help again, you know where to find me." As she boarded the ship and it ascended into the sky, Ethan stood alone on the ice, watching until it disappeared into the stars. Though the cold bit at his skin, he felt a warmth in his chest, a warmth born of connection, hope, and the knowledge that, even in the harshest of places, humanity's light could shine. The silent stars above. The silver ship disappeared into the night sky, leaving a streak of light that lingered like a fading dream. Ethan stood motionless, the icy wind tugging at his jacket, but the cold seemed distant now. His heart was heavy, not with regret, but with a peculiar emptiness, a void left by Arya's departure. For years, his world had been quiet, desolate, and unchanging. In the span of a week, that solitude had been transformed into something almost unrecognizable. And now, it was gone again. Ethan trudged back to his igloo, the crunch of his boots on the snow the only sound accompanying him. Inside, the warmth of the heater greeted him, but it felt inadequate. The small shelter, once a bastion of comfort, now seemed oppressively silent. On the table by the heater, the small crystalline shard Arya had left behind caught his eye. It glimmered faintly, pulsing with an inner light. Ethan picked it up, running his fingers over the smooth surface. Attached to it was the transmitter she'd left, a lifeline to her world, should he ever need it. The gesture was thoughtful, but it also felt like a promise he wasn't sure he would ever be brave enough to make. A world rediscovered. The days that followed were a return to routine, but the monotony of survival felt heavier now. Hunting for food, repairing his equipment, and tending to his shelter occupied his time, yet his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about the stories Arya had told him of her world, a place bathed in golden light, where warmth and life flourished. It was a stark contrast to the cold, barren wasteland he called home. One evening, as he sat staring at the transmitter, a thought began to form. He had lived on this frozen planet for so long, simply enduring. But what if there was more? What if Arya's visit wasn't just a fleeting moment of connection, but a sign that he could do more than survive? What if he could rebuild, explore, and leave something meaningful behind? The next morning, Ethan began to act on his newfound resolve. He ventured farther than he ever had before, mapping the surrounding terrain with precision. He discovered pockets of resources he hadn't noticed before, mineral-rich ice deposits, geothermal vents that offered natural heat, and even a hidden valley where the wind was less brutal. Each discovery was a small victory, a reminder that even in desolation, there were opportunities. A signal from the past. Weeks turned into months, and Ethan's life took on a new rhythm. The igloo was no longer just a shelter, it was evolving into a base of operations. Using parts scavenged from Arya's crash site, he constructed better tools and expanded his living space. He even managed to rig up a small greenhouse using thermal insulation, growing hardy plants that could withstand the cold. It was during one of these projects that the transmitter Arya had left suddenly activated. A sharp, melodic tone filled the room, and Ethan froze, his heart pounding. The crystalline shard glowed brightly, projecting a holographic display into the air. Arya's face appeared, her expression calm but urgent. "Ethan," her voice echoed in the small room, "I hope this message reaches you. We've analyzed your planet's data, and there's something you need to know. Deep beneath the ice, there's evidence of ancient technology, something not of human origin. It could hold the key to understanding what happened to your world and possibly even aid in its recovery." Ethan stared at the projection, his mind racing. Ancient technology? Beneath the ice? The idea seemed impossible, yet Arya's calm certainty was undeniable. The message continued. If you're willing, my people can guide you remotely. Use the shard, it will link to our network. But this will be dangerous. The ice is unstable, and the technology is old, perhaps even hostile. I trust you'll make the right decision. The message ended, and the projection faded, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. Into the unknown. The next morning, Ethan prepared for the journey. He packed his gear carefully, ensuring he had enough supplies to last him several weeks. The transmitter shard, now glowing faintly, was secured in a padded pouch strapped to his belt. It felt strange to leave the familiarity of his base behind, but a part of him was excited. For the first time in years, he had a purpose beyond mere survival. The journey to the coordinates Arya had provided was grueling. The ice fields were treacherous, with jagged crevices hidden beneath thin layers of snow. Ethan moved cautiously, using his reinforced boots and climbing gear to navigate the terrain. The shard acted as his guide, projecting a faint beam of light that pointed him in the right direction. After several days of travel, he arrived at the location, a massive glacier that loomed like a wall before him. Embedded within its crystalline surface was a faint glow, pulsating rhythmically like a heartbeat. Ethan approached cautiously, his breath fogging in the cold air. This must be it, he muttered to himself, setting up his tools to begin excavation. Unveiling the past. The ice was dense, but Ethan's equipment, enhanced with parts from Arya's ship, made the work manageable. As he chipped away at the glacier, the glowing object beneath became clearer. It was a structure, large and angular, made of a material unlike anything he'd seen before. The patterns on its surface were intricate, almost organic, and they seemed to shift as he worked. Hours later, the object was fully exposed, a doorway leading into the glacier. Ethan hesitated, his instincts warning him to turn back. But the memory of Arya's message spurred him on. With a deep breath, he stepped inside. The interior was unlike anything he had imagined. The walls shimmered with light, and faint hums echoed through the space. It was as though the structure was alive, waiting for something or someone to awaken it. As Ethan ventured deeper, he discovered what appeared to be a control room. Panels covered in glowing symbols lined the walls, and at the center was a pedestal with a faintly glowing sphere. He approached cautiously, reaching out to touch the sphere. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, the room came alive. A holographic display filled the space, showing images of Earth as it once was, lush, vibrant, and teeming with life. Ethan watched in awe as the images shifted, revealing the planet's slow descent into ruin. The final image was a message, written in a language he couldn't understand. But somehow, he knew what it meant. Restore. Rebuild. Revive. The awakening of the glacier. Ethan stood in stunned silence as the glowing sphere's final words, restore. Rebuild. Revive. Echoed in his mind. The holographic display faded, leaving only the faint hum of the ancient structure. The message was clear, but its implications were staggering. Could this technology really help rebuild the desolate world he had called home for so long? The pedestal where the sphere rested began to shift. A series of symbols glowed faintly along its base, and Ethan felt a sudden vibration beneath his feet. It wasn't just the room, something larger was stirring deep within the glacier. His instinct urged him to retreat, but curiosity, now mixed with purpose, anchored him in place. Ethan reached out again, placing his hand on the sphere. This time, the structure responded immediately. Lights burst to life, illuminating corridors that stretched deeper into the glacier. A low, resonant voice echoed through the space, speaking in a language Ethan couldn't understand. Yet, as the words continued, something in the shard Arya had left began to glow brighter, and the alien voice transformed into one he could comprehend. User identified. Biological signature, human. System initializing restoration protocols. The room seemed to pulse with energy, and Ethan felt a jolt of adrenaline. Restoration protocols, he muttered, his voice barely audible over the hum. What does that mean? The core of the ice. Guided by the glowing pathways, Ethan ventured deeper into the structure. The corridors twisted and turned, each lined with panels that displayed fragmented images. Scenes of Earth's ancient landscapes, alien worlds, and technological wonders beyond comprehension. The more he saw, the more he realized that this place wasn't just a machine. It was a repository of knowledge, a relic of a civilization far more advanced than anything humanity had ever known. At the end of a long passageway, he reached a massive chamber. The walls were covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift and move as he approached. In the center of the room stood a colossal device, a towering, cylindrical core that radiated a faint, pulsating light. Cables and conduits extended from it, disappearing into the ice above and below. Ethan's gaze was drawn to a console near the base of the core. It glowed faintly, its interface alien yet intuitive. As he approached, the shard at his waist projected a small hologram of Aria's face. "Ethan," her voice said, though it was only a recording. "If you've made it this far, you've found the heart of the glacier. This is where the restoration process begins. The core is designed to repair ecosystems, stabilize climates, and revive damaged environments. But it needs a key, a biological signature from this world. You're the last one left. Only you can activate it." Ethan's hands trembled as he placed them on the console. The system responded instantly, scanning his body with a soft blue light. Symbols flashed across the screen, and the entire chamber began to vibrate. A world awakens. The core's light intensified, sending beams of energy through the conduits. Ethan watched in awe as the ice above him cracked and shifted, revealing shafts of natural light that hadn't touched this part of the world in centuries. The glacier groaned and trembled as massive currents of energy rippled outward. Outside, the frozen landscape began to change. Snow melted in patches, revealing rich, dark soil beneath. Streams of water emerged from the ice, carving paths through the barren terrain. The air seemed to grow warmer, and faint traces of greenery began to sprout along the edges of the thawing earth. Ethan stepped back from the console, his heart racing. The scale of what he was witnessing was almost too much to process. The core wasn't just repairing the glacier, it was reawakening the planet. But the process was far from stable. Alarms began to blare, and the console's screen flashed red. A deep, mechanical voice interrupted the hum of progress, warning, "System destabilized. Environmental balance compromised. Manual adjustments required." Ethan cursed under his breath. Of course, it wasn't going to be that easy. He scanned the console, searching for anything that resembled a control panel. The shard on his belt flickered to life again, projecting a map of the core's internal systems. "You'll need to stabilize the energy flow," the recording of Aria's voice instructed. "The core's systems are ancient and fragile. If the balance isn't restored, the restoration process could backfire, triggering an environmental collapse." A race against time. Ethan navigated the chamber with a sense of urgency. The map guided him to several access points around the core, each one connected to a specific function: climate regulation, water flow, and atmospheric adjustments. Using his tools, he worked quickly to reroute energy, seal damaged conduits, and recalibrate the system. The tasks were grueling, each one requiring precision and speed. At one point, a burst of energy from an unstable conduit knocked him to the ground, leaving his hands numb and his ears ringing. But he pushed through, driven by the knowledge that failure wasn't an option. As he completed the final adjustment, the alarms ceased, replaced by a deep, resonant hum. The core's light steadied, and the vibrations beneath his feet faded. The console displayed a single message: stabilization achieved. Restoration process resuming. Ethan slumped against the wall, his body aching but his spirit triumphant. He had done it. The planet's revival was no longer a distant dream, it was happening, right here, right now. A message from the stars. As Ethan prepared to leave the chamber, the shard at his waist activated once more. This time, it wasn't a recording. Aria's face appeared, her expression filled with wonder and pride. "Ethan," she said, her voice clear and vibrant. "We received the beacon's signal. My people are on their way. They've analyzed the data from the core, and they believe this technology could help countless other worlds. What you've done here, it's extraordinary." He smiled faintly, exhaustion etched into his features. "Couldn't have done it without your guidance.
Aria's expression softened. "You've given this world a second chance, Ethan.
And in doing so, you've reminded us all of humanity's resilience.
My people will be there soon to help with the restoration. Until then, stay safe. You're not alone anymore." The hologram faded, leaving Ethan alone in the silent chamber. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time: hope. The frozen heart of humanity. Ethan emerged from the ancient structure into a world that was no longer as he had left it. The icy winds that once howled across the barren tundra had softened, and the biting cold seemed tempered. The ground beneath his feet was no longer frozen solid but slick with meltwater, revealing patches of dark soil that shimmered faintly under the dim light of the planet's twin suns. For the first time in decades, life stirred. Tiny green shoots pushed through the cracks in the melting ice, defying the harsh environment. Streams of water coursed through newly formed valleys, their gurgling sounds alien to Ethan's ears after so many years of silence. He stood in awe, breathing in air that seemed fresher, lighter, and more alive. A faint smile crept across his face, though it was tinged with the weight of responsibility. The core's activation had sparked a transformation, but it was only the beginning. Unlikely visitors. As Ethan made his way back toward his base, the shard on his belt began to vibrate, its glow intensifying. He paused, pulling it free and holding it in his gloved hand. A faint beam of light projected from the shard, forming an image of Aria. "Ethan," her voice came, clear and urgent, "my people are nearing your position. But there's something you need to know. The core's activation has drawn attention that may not be friendly." Ethan's brow furrowed. "What kind of attention?" "There are other species in this galaxy," Aria explained, her expression darkening. "Not all of them value life as we do. Some see planets like yours as resources to exploit. The signal the core emitted, it's a beacon to them too." Ethan's heart sank. The thought of invaders descending on the planet, drawn by the very technology meant to save it, filled him with dread. "How long do we have?" "Hours, perhaps less," Aria replied. "We're moving as fast as we can, but you'll need to prepare. Defend the core if you can. It's the key to your planet's survival." Ethan nodded, his jaw tightening. "Understood. Preparing for the unknown." Back at his base, Ethan worked with the urgency of a man with everything to lose. He reinforced his shelter, using the advanced materials scavenged from Aria's crash site. With the shard's guidance, he rigged makeshift defenses, turrets powered by repurposed energy cells, motion detectors crafted from salvaged components, and even a series of traps designed to slow any intruders. As he worked, the shard provided real-time updates. Aria's people were approaching, their ship navigating through the planet's unstable atmosphere. But so too were the others, unidentified vessels closing in on the core's location. Ethan paused only briefly to eat, his mind racing with strategies. The odds were against him, but he refused to let despair take root. He had survived this frozen wasteland for years, he would survive this too. More importantly, he would protect what had been started here. The planet deserved a chance to heal, to thrive again. First contact. The sky above darkened as the first of the alien ships descended. Ethan watched from the ridge near his base, his pulse quickening. The vessel was massive, its surface black as obsidian and adorned with jagged spires that radiated menace. It hovered silently for a moment before disgorging a swarm of smaller craft, each bristling with weaponry. Ethan activated his defenses, his hands steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. The first wave of drones approached, their sleek forms glinting in the pale light. His turrets roared to life, energy blasts ripping through the air and striking several of the machines. Explosions lit up the ridge, but more drones swarmed forward. The battle was chaotic and relentless. Ethan moved between defensive positions, using every ounce of his training and ingenuity to outmaneuver the attackers. He fired makeshift energy rifles, detonated traps, and even used the terrain to his advantage, luring drones into narrow crevices where they became easy targets. Despite his efforts, the sheer number of attackers threatened to overwhelm him. Just as his defenses began to falter, a brilliant light filled the sky. Ethan looked up to see a sleek silver ship descending rapidly. Its elegant design and shimmering surface were unmistakable. It was Aria's people. The tide turns.
The alien ship unleashed a barrage of energy pulses, scattering the hostile drones like leaves in the wind. Ethan watched in awe as the newcomers deployed their own forces, graceful, humanoid figures who moved with precision and purpose. Their weapons emitted beams of light that cut through the remaining drones with ease. Amidst the chaos, Aria emerged from the ship, her glowing green eyes scanning the battlefield. She spotted Ethan and hurried toward him, her expression a mixture of relief and determination. "You held them off," she said, her voice filled with admiration.
"Barely," Ethan replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "But I'm glad you're here." Aria nodded, glancing toward the core's location. "We need to secure the core. If they destroy it, everything we've worked for will be lost." Together, they led a final push to drive back the invaders. With Aria's people providing support, the tide of battle shifted decisively. The remaining hostile ships retreated, their forces shattered. A new beginning. With the threat neutralized, Ethan and Aria stood before the core once more. It pulsed steadily, its light now brighter and more stable than before.
The surrounding landscape bore the marks of battle, but signs of life continued to emerge: sprouting plants, flowing water, and a sky that seemed just a shade clearer.
Aria placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You've done something incredible here, Ethan. Not just for your world, but for ours as well. The knowledge we've gained will help countless others."
Ethan met her gaze, his expression weary but resolute.
"I didn't do it alone. And I'm not sure what comes next, but I'm ready to find out."
Aria smiled, a warmth in her eyes that mirrored the thawing planet around them.
"You'll never have to face it alone again."
As her people began working to stabilize the core further and ensure the planet's restoration, Ethan found himself looking toward the horizon. The world he had known was gone, replaced by something new, something alive, hopeful, and filled with possibilities. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe in a future worth fighting for.